Hi, I'm Niall Cooper, the CEO of Fair Game. It's been a while since our last podcast, and to say a lot has happened in interviewing is somewhat of a massive understatement. In July, MPs gave the green light to the independent football regulator. 115 people voted in favour and 98 against, and the bill received royal assent shortly after. And it's no underestimation to say that is a landmark moment for football, offering a once in a generation chance for a fairer, more sustainable, community rooted game. Since 2021, Fair Game has made this its mission, and to achieve it marks a huge success for us. Going forward, our aim is to champion a fairer future for football, developing realistic solutions to football's problems with groundbreaking research. We want to be the think tank for football for good, empowering like-minded organisations, encouraging, supporting value-driven clubs. 2 months ago, we unveiled Football Clubs, a force for good, our 28-page blueprint showing that ethical governance, equality, environmental responsibility and fan engagement can deliver long-term sustainability. It lays down three clear priorities for the regulator: fairer financial distribution up and down the pyramid, rewards for well-run, community-rooted clubs, and a real voice for fans in running their clubs. And of course, being Fair Game means we're not going to rest on our laurels. We've got two more major upcoming reports, one on tackling racism in football and another on measuring football's true social impact, both designed to give the regulator and the game hard evidence and, crucially, practical solutions. There's a couple of dates for the diaries also put in. So on the 10th of September, we'll be launching the brand new Fair Game Index, revealing whether football is truly regulatory ready. Then, on the 25th and 26th March next year, the Fair Game Conference takes place at the National Football Museum, bringing clubs, experts and stakeholders together to shape football's future. So if we work together with openness, collaboration, ambition, we can deliver a future where every fan wears their club shirt with pride, confident that the team they love will be there for generations to come, standing as a cornerstone of their community. I mean, there's no doubt that the need for reform is urgent. Just look at what's happening in the last couple of weeks. Morecambe faced suspension after months of unpaid wages and a stalled takeover. Sheffield Wednesday are under a transfer embargo and wage delays, with players refusing to play pre-season and fans mobilising protests. These are not isolated cases. They're symptoms of a system that must change, and Fair Game will be there to help it. Which brings us neatly on to the meat of today's podcast.
Hello and welcome once again to the Fair Game podcast. We love you football. I'm Graham Miller, and in today's episode, we're diving into the turbulent waters surrounding the future of Sheffield Wednesday, a club steeped in history, pride, passionate support, and now facing questions that go far beyond the pitch. It's a familiar story, a stay-away owner, Mr. Dejphon Chansiri, who hasn't paid the bills, hasn't paid the wages on time, has seen the Owls placed under another transfer embargo, a likely points deduction, and until the team ran out at Leicester at the weekend, there was even talk of the club facing extinction. It highlights the need for the new independent football regulator, which we'll come to shortly. Meantime, joining me are three voices at the heart of the conversation. Clive Betts, the Sheffield South East MP, chair of the all-party parliamentary group on football and lifelong Sheffield Wednesday fan. Mark Johnson from the Sheffield Wednesday Supporters Trust, who can tell us firsthand about the concerns, hopes and plans of the fan base. And Niall Cooper, CEO of Fair Game, who no doubt highlight precisely why he launched Fair Game to tackle these very issues. So Mark, let's start with you. After a summer of uncertainty, what were the emotions when the team actually ran out on Sunday?
Well, I think that there was a number of conflicting emotions because for most of the fan base, and certainly the away fans that were there, they weren't there to see the players run out because that was part of the protest. In a lot of ways, it was great to see football again because there's just been so much happening at the club. It's been very difficult to concentrate on football. Even small things like seeing a team sheet come out was kind of, it felt very different because we didn't know who was going to be there. So it was great to actually see football starting, but obviously we in the background we have a great deal of concerns about what's happening, and I guess seeing the players come out and for all the people watching it in such an amazing away day, we don't want that to go away. We want that for us, for our children, for our children's children, just like we've been able to do.
Now, arguably, Sheffield Wednesday, they'd be the biggest club to be close to extinction like this. Has there been a moment, is there a moment when you thought, hang on, we're gone, we've lost it?
I think when there was a sale process in place, and when that seemed to stop abruptly, it just seemed that there wasn't any sale happening. All we could really see was a black hole, kind of a death spiral of debt for the club. Um, Obviously, the regulator isn't in place, and going to be a massive issue going forward. We hope that the regulator can come in and kind of save us to some extent. And Clive, obviously, is the expert in that area. So there was and there are concerns that we may not be able to carry on. However, even if that happened, and I'm sure Niall knows a lot about this, we would definitely keep the Wednesday name going, but we really don't want to be a Phoenix club if we can get something that's a little bit better. So there are genuine concerns, and we get people coming up and say, "Well, they'll not go bust, will they?" Actually, we could, and it really, really could happen. It isn't just about, we'll get down to the bottom, then we'll definitely get back again. It's really not like that this time. It's a very tricky situation.
What is the latest? Have you been told any news?
In reality, no. Very little news comes out of the club on anything really, and I'm not necessarily blaming the people who are still working at the club because they're operating under very difficult circumstances as well. But there is an information vacuum on the sale, on if there is a sale going forward, on what the owner feels he really wants to do. There are worries that we might get some kind of fake sale where there's somebody put up to kind of buy the club, but in the background there might be people who we don't want involved. So what happens in an information vacuum is everybody makes up their own stories. Obviously, there's possibly NDAs around, which make it difficult for people to come out and actually say. But there are a whole host of things that all we have really are just worries and concerns rather than definite information, and that makes it very difficult to know what's true and what isn't true.
Clive, it's a state of execution for the club, wearing your two hats, your party committee, and indeed a lifelong Sheffield Wednesday fan. How have we got to this stage?
We've got to this stage because the league is a league of member clubs, who, when it comes down to regulation, each club doesn't really want the league to have too much authority over how it operates as an individual club. So the authority the league has got and the powers it's got to deal with owners who simply don't want to invest in a club and are happy to see it run down are limited. And that's what the regulator is designed to do, is designed to have more powers, particularly the power ultimately to come in and appoint trustees who could take over the running of the club. And that's something that isn't there now. So currently, as in the case of other clubs, an owner sits on one side, isn't interested, isn't bothered, can't be contacted, stops putting money in, and there's a risk to that club. Just as Bury went out of existence, just as Morecambe are struggling now, with an owner that doesn't want to do the necessary things to keep the club going forward. So that's the problem. We've got Chansiri. He's put some money in the past, but we think he's borrowed some of that money, so he wants his money back. He wants that money back, which is more than the club is now worth. And therefore, he sat on his hands and done nothing. That's the problem. An owner who isn't really interested.
How frustrating is that for you? Because from what you've said, your hands are proverbially tied behind your back.
Very frustrating because for a long time it was, I'm not selling, it's my club. If you want to keep it going, you can raise £2 million, he said at one point, to pay the tax man. I mean, that was just a piece of nonsense. So he's saying now he is willing to sell, but he's made no effort. He's put no system in place, no framework for any would-be buyer to approach and get a proper conversation going. Everyone who you talk to says he's impossible to deal with. He won't respond to genuine requests. People can't get any information. So nobody knows actually what the real state of play is. We've found out now he's been borrowing money to keep the club afloat. We've no idea where the money's been borrowed from. And do the people who have been lending the money have any role now in a potential sale?
Clive, this is your patch. What would it mean to the community if Wednesday were to disappear?
Well, I mean, everything to so many people. I mean, I'm not unusual in that I went to Wednesday, first of all, with my dad. He went with his dad. I went with my uncle and my cousin. It's very much a family thing. And it is not like any other product where you find that it's no longer on sale. The washing powder is not produced anymore, so you can buy some different washing powder. A football club is something that's your life, you're part of. It's ingrained into you from a young age that is your club, that's your passion, that's your belief. And to have it taken away, I think is just, well, you can't begin to imagine it. So, and I think that is the one asset we've now got at Wednesday. The Chansiri has let the ground run down. We've got a stand actually closed now. We've got the training pitch, which actually isn't fit for purpose and is not worthy of many League Two clubs. The one thing we have got is a fantastic fan base. Over 25,000 average home gates, sold out every away game virtually last season. That's an incredible fan base. That's our asset. That's our belief. That's our community. Anyone wanting to buy the club, we've got to make sure that the right person has got that asset to buy into.
Now, is this the sort of thing the new football regulator will be able to stop, to prevent, or at least get involved with in a positive way?
I think Clive indicated there, but one of the things that Fair Game were really keen to push forward, and Clive did a brilliant job in Parliament in getting some guarantees, is this trustee element. So where a regulator can introduce a trustee into a board, and that trustee basically has the golden share, which basically means the kind of when you have these reckless and irresponsible owners, this is definitely the case with Sheffield Wednesday and also at Morecambe, and previously arguably Reading and Southend, that role will be able to come in and help the club at that time and actually speed up the sale process. Make sure that you don't have the owners that are just sitting there watching a club slowly die, which I'm a rarity on this call, I feel, being not a Sheffield Wednesday fan, but certainly I've experienced that sort of trauma through my own experience, but also through watching so many other clubs go through the same thing. And what the regulator has this ability to do is to stop it happening again. Now, where it is with Sheffield Wednesday is that sadly, it's probably not going to be in place properly operational to be able to do something in the immediate term because it's not fully legally operational. But that threat is there now. And I would hope that that is enough to speed up the process and rescue Sheffield Wednesday, which is such a proud, fantastic club. I've got relatives in Sheffield. I know how much it means to the community. And that's really where I really hope that they wake up and smell the coffee and listen to the fantastic work that Mark and Clive and the community are putting in to try and save the club and make the club, a viable entity going forward. It should not be happening to Sheffield Wednesday. It shouldn't happen to any club, but seeing it happen to Sheffield Wednesday, I think it's a real wake up call for football. And it says very, very loudly why we need a regulator.
What would the regulator do? It's Monday morning, the regulator's in place. How does he get in touch with the owner who clearly doesn't want to know?
So the thing is that what you're going to have is a system where there'll be a licensing program. So the licensing program, you would have the regulator having the power to impose a trustee onto that body that has the control of the license of the club. And that is where the power would reside. So actually having the legal control of Sheffield Wednesday, the license asset, would fall to that trustee. And that's where you start seeing that ability to change and work out the operations of it. The whole flesh and the bones of all of that process still needs to be put into place. And it's something the regulator, I know, is looking at and is developing. That is what would happen. If the regulator was here tomorrow, you would hope that there would be a trustee in by tomorrow, by the day after that, and that Wednesday fans would have a new ownership structure in place, and that club would be openly available to sale. And personally, I would hope that Mark and the rest of the Wednesdayites have that ability to put together something that actually benefits the club and keeps the club right in the heart of that community and honouring all the kind of brilliant history that the club's got.
Mark, the fans are clearly in place. Now, the 11 who played against Leicester, well, it surprised everyone, I think, with their determination, their passion. But with the squad available, with very many inexperienced players, is relegation inevitable, or simply doesn't that matter at the moment?
It doesn't matter because it's existential. I mean, it does matter, but ultimately, the club could go out of existence, and that's more important than any 90 minutes or any season, because we've got a long history since 1867, and we want to see that go on. I think where it does matter is that if we become uncompetitive, then it does matter to the EFL. Nobody wants to see teams being rolled over 5 or 6-0. However, as Clive says, it is a members club, and I'm sure Preston are very happy they've got two of our players. Wrexham are happy they've got our player. And so, we'll get a little bit of help, but actually, we'd be the same, wouldn't we? That's part of the problem. There's a wider issue, isn't there, about sustainability, and I think that's where it's not just the regulator, it's us as fans who have to make it clear that we want a sustainable football club. We've got a document called Better Wednesday, and it doesn't call for a sovereign wealth fund to come in and get us into the Champions League. That's not what we want. We want sustainability. We want to get by on our merits. We want to reflect the community of Sheffield. We want players to play that way. We want youngsters coming through. Now, it's easy to say that, isn't it, and then get relegated. But, we're facing that anyway. We want what comes out of this as the Ashes, as to be a club that we can all be proud of as Sheffielders and take it forward. And, hopefully something good might come out of this entire mess.
Mm. For the time being, though, as you pointed out, the integrity of the division of the league, it's in doubt, isn't it? It's unfair or fair, whichever way you look at it.
I mean, we're down to 13, but we're going to fill one of the relegation places, so a lot of people are happy about that, and that's just the competition, isn't it? But it will be increasingly difficult unless we sign players for us to kind of even make some kind of stab. I mean, it was incredible what we did in the first hour until we lost players through injury because we've had no pre-season. We don't even have youngsters coming in. I think 6 out of the 9 players hadn't had a league debut, and that's it's going to be very difficult to maintain. We've got 2 injuries yesterday and a sending off, and as the season goes on, and as the lack of a pre-season becomes evident, some of the older players that we've got, like Liam Palmer, who's a one-club man and he's kind of in his mid-30s, he can't play 46 games this season. Not many of the players can. So we're going to be, probably quite early into the season, it's going to be very evident where we are. Now, we might be able to cobble together a kind of expendables bunch of old pros to kind of battle our way out, and that's the hope. Maybe we can do that, and we'll back them to the hilt if we can. But ultimately, it's not about the results this season. We probably will get points deductions. I wish we weren't, because I don't think we've gained an advantage, but we'll take what we take on that. But it really is about the existence of the club, and so we're just hopefully going to just back up the players all season and see where it takes us. And if we have to get relegated and come back, well, we've done it before. We'll have to do it again. We're not a fan base that expects much, actually. Just basic competence will do.
Clive, you've already mentioned the North Stand at Hillsborough. It's now
Yes.
been closed for this season for safety reasons. And yet the club has already taken money from season ticket holders to sit there. I mean, we seem to be getting worse and worse and worse.
It's unbelievable. And I was actually there when the North Stand was opened back in 1961. And it was the first cantilever stand that ran the full length of a football pitch in England. It was an iconic stand. It still is in terms of design. The club knew 3 years ago there were problems. The safety, the sports ground committee, the SAG, met and told Wednesday they had problems that they needed to rectify. It wasn't dangerous at that time, but there were problems that were going to get worse. They've had that repeated to them in each of the last 3 years, to the point where the prohibition order has been made because the work hadn't been done. Now, again, it's typical of the way that Chansiri operates. He puts his head down, he closes his ears to any advice, and hopes everything will go away and that he can carry on doing what he wants to do. It's impossible to work with. That's what everyone says. This is just another example. And to sell season tickets as late apparently as last week in the stand that was due to be closed. I mean, what sort of club is it? But we've got, look, the people at the club, the officers, are doing their best. Nobody wants to have a go at them. They're trying. But for a long time, we've had no chief executive, no director of football. So the personnel framework to run the club hasn't been there. We've had no board of directors either. We have an owner that sits in Thailand, comes to occasional games, and nobody can do anything without him saying yes or no. That you can't run a major football club on that basis. So I think all we can say is looking forward, if we can get an owner in who doesn't really want to run the club, but wants to work with the fans, the new spirit of the Football Governance Act, work with fans like the Wednesday Supporters Trust, who've done an absolutely brilliant job in the last few weeks to pull supporters together, to give them some hope, to shape a way forward. An owner that comes in and wants to work with the fans, and something else has just been mentioned that Mark rightly raised. We haven't been growing our own players. The Sheffield Junior Football League is the biggest junior football league in Europe, and Wednesday don't bring young players through. So that's a challenge for the future. Lots of possibilities, potential to be optimistic. Just get Mr. Chansiri out of the way and then bring someone in who wants to work with us, wants to grow the club. It won't be Premier League tomorrow. It might take several years, but there is a basis for that if the club is run properly.
Chansiri, when he took over the club 10 years ago, he spent around 160 million on top of the 38 million or so that cost him. So he has put money in, hasn't he? I mean, he's not just done a runner at any time. He has invested.
He's incompetent. He's wasted money on the club. That's what's happened. You've got a ground that's depreciating and deteriorating, which he spent nothing on. You've got training pitches, which are, I'll say, not as good as some League Two clubs. He's put no money into the academy to help develop that. He's just wasted money, and he's seen it just as a debt that he keeps on funding in some way, probably by borrowing money himself. Just look at when we played back in 2015 in the playoff finals. We played Brighton. Look where Brighton are compared with then. Brighton have gone forward incredibly into Europe, sustained themselves in the Premier League. They've got a brilliant new ground, wonderful for training facilities. Their owner hasn't been putting money in. They've actually been making money. Brighton have been making money because they've had a business plan. They've had a competent management and a business plan. We've had incompetent management, no plan, and money that's been wasted without sustainable long-term objectives.
Money is no guarantee for success in football, is it? Sorry, Niall, you want to come in?
Yeah, Graham, just to pick up on that. I mean, there's some really important points Clive made. At Fair Game, we've done lots of research into looking what makes a club sustainable. And it's that medium to long-term vision that's really important that Clive indicated there. It is that investment in your stadium. It is the investment in your academy. It is the investment in your training facilities. Those are all very obvious key things that make your club medium to long-term sustainable. If you don't do that, then you're left, sadly, with exactly what happened at Sheffield Wednesday. That's an example of what it is. Those things are the things that in any financial distribution deal, potentially going forward, they should be the things that are prioritized because those are the things that make a club long-term sustainable. And I think that is the real key. And that's the bit that you have too much naivety and, Clive uses the word incompetence in football that is causing this strife and it should not be allowed to happen. The other big thing I think the regulator will have powers over, which is very much welcomed, is those red flags that will show up early because there were plenty. And again, when you're talking about a place where the warnings are in place about a ground being not fit for purpose or becoming not fit for purpose, one stand, those red flags would have been weighed very heavily in by a regulator, and they should have been by the EFL as well, but that by the regulator, and that's an indication of when it is time to act. That's what we need to have, and that sort of sensible attitude is the key. As a football fan, I have absolutely nothing but admiration for everything Sheffield Wednesday fans are doing at the moment. The protest that was conducted brilliantly and absolutely brilliantly on Sunday, where the fans were outside for 5 minutes and then it all came through. And to see how well supported that was as a protest tells you the resolve that exists in the Steel City. And for me, that is just such a message to football that it is central to communities. It is central to cities and towns, and it means so much. And that's why all these things are absolutely fundamental. And I think from fair game, and we obviously interact with so many other teams and clubs across the country. There is just that absolute admiration, and I know Mark knows this, and Clive will know this as well, that the football family is very firmly, and fair game as well, very firmly on their side, and we will do anything we can that's within our powers to try and help. We and Mark and I've had conversations about whether it ever comes to a Phoenix club, and there will be hundreds, if not thousands, of people at other clubs that will step in and help and do whatever they can to make a Wednesday FC or whatever a success if it comes to that. Nobody wants it to come to that, but if it does, that will be one of the best fan-run clubs that have ever existed.
Another reality, though, is the lure of the Premier League, the gamble of getting into the Premier League, because in his first year in charge, well, he got to the playoff final at Wembley. Now, if he'd won that, well, would we be calling him a genius? I mean, it's that, isn't it?
Well, I think this comes back to the point of, be careful what you want. And, it isn't just, us. If you look at Sheffield United, who've been much more successful than us, and, this really pains me to say this, but they certainly have. And, as Clive mentioned, the training academy at United is great, and they've reached the Premier League a couple of times. What they've found, obviously, is after a little bit of success, then you get into the same spin cycle of coming back down to the Championship, having to do it all again, then going up and losing a load of games in the Premier League. And then you come back down, and eventually that doesn't happen. So you just spin down the Championship. Now that's not a sustainable model for anybody. So, why are we trying to become that team? It's not, do we want a sovereign wealth fund to come in? Probably not, unless they're Norwegian, maybe that'd be okay. But we really don't think, it's opened our eyes a little bit, this, to kind of what's in front of us. Just want to also mention the Leicester City fans, who were absolutely spectacular on Sunday, clapping us in. It was an unbelievable thing to do. They held up, their own kind of ultras. And I think there is something about the kind of ultras culture, the German fan culture, that we haven't quite tapped into yet. That's really interesting. And we haven't done it as Wednesday, but they Union FS, I think, as they're called, they had their own banner saying Chansiri out. So they were really supportive, and our trust and their trust have been in touch. There is a groundswell underneath that actually knows what needs to be done. The thing is, it's about money and it's about business, and that's fine. That's the Premiership is kind of a tent pole of our kind of national economy to some extent. We've got to work with that, but also as fans, we've got to realise that we've probably got to go a different way, just perpetuating the myth that the happiness is right at the top of the Premiership pyramid, because it isn't. Happiness was Sunday.
But you're asking a lot. I think, stop a fan in the street and he'll say, come on, or she'll say, we want promotion. We want to get to the Premier League.
Ask a Sheffield United fan what they think about getting promoted to the Premier League. It's really interesting. Of course they do. They want to beat Wednesday. They want to be relatively successful, but they don't want a season like they had, 2 years ago. It was terrible for them. It was great for us, but it was the only thing keeping us going to some extent. But so of course, yes, the Premiership is still an attraction, but it's more an attraction for the owners to drag in the money than it is actually for fans to see themselves embarrassed every week. How much of the day?
Hard thing for football fans, though. Go on.
I mean, that I think indicates a bit about the wealth distribution within the game and how that needs to be addressed anyway, because we talk about that, the trampoline clubs now rather than the parachute payments, clubs that just bounce backwards and forwards, and the disparity between the divisions is growing, which makes it really difficult. And as Graham mentioned, it encourages that gambling culture, and that's probably the root cause of a lot of the ills. And it's what's happening at Sheffield Wednesday is that example of saying, right, well, let's look at this again. Let's look at something that actually embeds sustainability rather than, at the moment the culture is definitely not that. So there's something that needs to be done, and we're looking at that, and it's something that's really fundamental. So I think there is that big element there, Mark, that we need to address. And again, just you're right about what happened with Leicester City fans. You seeing that, and I do know Blades, and I do know, what they think of Sheffield Wednesday when they're being nice. Obviously there's the rivalry. There always will be. But nobody really wants to see what's happening there happen. And I mean, equally, when all Sheffield United are going to be aspiring to do is having that one season in the Championship that they enjoy before they get tonked every week in the Premier League. And what's the reality? That's not actually fun. I think having your own club that's the heart of your community, that cares about your community, that means so much. That's the enjoyable bit. That's what you would have got out of Sunday. That's what it means about having a supporters trust that is growing and booming and bringing the fans together. That I think is a real strong point and a real, brilliant bit. I mean, like all the memories that Clive will have from his time following Sheffield Wednesday, a lot of them will be the ones that are shared with fellow fans. That's the bit that kind of those moments that really stick out. You can't have that enjoyment if you haven't got fans around you feeling part of that community together.
Memories are
Yeah.
fun, Clive. We're told the owner wants £100 million. He's never going to get that. So
No, he isn't.
what happens next?
He wants to recover most of the money he's put in. Well, sorry, football clubs are not valued on that basis. They're valued on their assets and their potential. He's destroyed most of the assets and a lot of the potential while he's been there. So he's lucky if he gets 30 to 40 million now. I think that's a general view people have. Ultimately, he's going to have a choice, isn't he? If he carries on like he is, he could end up with nothing. Or, as I think Now said a little while ago, the threat of the regulator might concentrate his mind. If the regulator isn't in immediately, and we are putting pressure on, I had a long conversation with the Secretary of State the other day and the Sports Minister. They want to get the regulator in as soon as they can. And I know David Coogan, who I've spoken to, wants to be there and operating as soon as he can. But ultimately, just the threat of that coming down the road might concentrate Chansiri's mind. Now, I don't know whether it will, because I don't know whether he even looks at any of this and listens to anything. But he's not going to get 100 million. So it's a complete pie in the sky. And there's not been one serious worked up bid. There was this effort by some Italians the other week, which was so laughable it was unreal. These were people who already tried to and failed to buy 3 clubs in the lower Spanish and Italian leagues in the last couple of years. They hadn't even raised the money of a few $100,000 for any of those. And the organisation dealing with the sale said that as part of that process, there were actually documents that they believe were forged. Now, I mean, this is just a joke, a complete joke. So he's quoting a figure which no one's going to pay him. He's not engaged with anyone to sell. Just maybe he said to the EFL now that he has put in place a framework and a process to enable a sale to happen. I just worry that Mark's comments might be right. There may be some ruse in there where someone's brought in as a front and control doesn't really change and the problems just continue. We have to be very wary who eventually takes over.
Could the EFL themselves be doing any more? I mean, the threat of expulsion from the league is what finally brought to an end the chaos at Reading, wasn't it? I mean, should they be doing more? They haven't said very much at all, have they?
The threat of expulsion is always a problem, of course, if it actually ends up being enacted, and that's always the worry. I think they are trying to put pressure on him now. Maybe they should have done it earlier. I think there are questions about the extent to which they believe Chansiri's financial forecasts. Within a few hours of the last one, I think it was in March, his business plan, he wasn't paying wages. But he's lied, hasn't he? I think it always is a challenge for a regulator who is not independent. It's a membership organization. Whether they doubt an owner, whether they take them at face value. And clearly, Chansiri has not given true stories about the situation for a number of months now. I think it is difficult. That's why we've got the new regulator, isn't it? Because the current regulatory system doesn't work. And we can accept that. So it's a challenge. I think what we'd like to do now, I think the league have said to us that they know he's borrowing money. I think we want some assurance now that who he's borrowing the money from, and are those people who've been lending money to Chansiri, have they got any degree of control over the sale process? Now, the league tells us they don't believe they have. But again, none of this is out in the public domain. None of it's transparent. I think the league is struggling. I've got some sympathy for them in the position. How do you deal with a man who keeps telling you things that aren't true? I don't know how you begin to deal with him.
Mark, how are you feeling? Look ahead to the future here. I mean, how do you see things in a few months' time, or literally the next few weeks? Absolutely vital and crucial.
I think it's the next few weeks. I think the next few weeks will tell us whether it's going to be a medium to long haul, because I think that this is the time when, all the in normality that, it would clearly be a sale. That would be the way out. So you would expect a sale. If he doesn't sell, then obviously there's something probably more nefarious at foot, isn't there? And there's got to be a reason why he's not selling. And I think the biggest fear for us is that this just carries on. Everybody loses heart. The press go away, and it just becomes normalized that we're this, zombie club just trying to compete at the bottom of the league with relegation that's inevitable, and everybody just accepts it because actually, that's the only thing that people can do. I do think, having the regulator on the horizon is great, but what I guess mine and everybody's fear is that actually money talks in football, and the way that accountancy is undertaken in football, the way that valuations are undertaken in football, is a big problem, and it's not going to be solved by us or the trust or anybody like that. There's a kind of structural financial issue that needs to be solved somehow. So we could be the collateral damage of that. So that is a big fear. So I'm still pretty worried and still very concerned. I'm fortunate that I've got the trust to focus my mind, because when you keep busy on something and you do feel like at least you're doing something, and it's kind of great to be part of it. But I know a lot of fans who just, it's like trying to talk to my dad. My dad's 86. He was the one who took me there. And, what's happening down at Wednesday then? Can it get any worse? And it's like, well, unfortunately, Dad, Greg Wallace is doing the catering or something like that. It's kind of, it's really bad for people like my dad who doesn't, can't grasp anything, doesn't understand why this has happened to his club that he's loved and he played in the reserves for so long. They're the people who really, are struggling with this. For me, keeping busy and kind of knowing a little bit about it, it's at least something to hold on to. But it's not great, and let's hope we do get a sale that we can all get behind quite soon.
Now, Mark says there that money talks in football. People outside the game who don't take a great interest in it, don't know the nuances and so on, can't understand it with all this money washing around in the game. And yet here we are with all these world famous football clubs on the verge of extinction. It is bizarre, isn't it? Just to the general interested outside.
I think this all comes back to how the financial flow in the game operates, and that kind of risk and gambling culture that has been got out of control. And that's the bit that we need to look at. We need to look at the root cause of this. And that's the bit that, Fair Game definitely will be looking at and putting for proposals and ideas and concepts with, we're working really closely at the moment with a lot of the leading football financial experts in the country to look at what an alternative model can do that would encourage clubs to not be as reckless and to have that sustainable approach, the long-term sustainability that would help clubs like Sheffield Wednesday never get into this situation. So that's very much where we are. So the system's clearly broken. I mean, nobody can deny that now. It does need fixing. It does need some real fresh thought in it from an independent body. I think that's quite key, that you don't have football governing football when it hasn't done a very good job at it for the last 50, 60 years or whatever. And this is a moment that we really need to grasp, and it's actually a real good opportunity. I've got one message to Mark as well, and the Sheffield Wednesday fans, is we won't forget you. Stay strong. There are plenty of clubs that have been through where you're at.
Yeah.
And there are plenty of clubs there that have got those memories and those scars. And as a football community, we stand together and we will be there. So don't ever feel isolated. You know, I've been through that, and you can feel there are times when it feels bleak, and there are all times where it will feel like there is no hope, but there is hope. There is the football community cares. You know, we will be there for you. And that's, I think, a very, very important message to take out that whether it's, you know, my club that I was on the board of, or if it's fair game, you know, there are so many people there that are there for you, and we will remain there for you. So we won't forget.
Thanks. No, that's really important, I think, for us going forward.
Clive, can you go on?
No, go on, Greg. Go on.
I was just going to ask you, can you add to that optimism?
Well, no, look, in my heart of hearts, do I think I'll be supporting Wednesday next season in a league? Maybe it's a league below. Yes, I do. I think there is possibilities. The problem is we've got an owner who is so problematic, so unpredictable. You don't know what he's going to do next. Is he going to do something just to spite everybody because the fans are upset him by protesting, as he got upset a few months ago? Hopefully not. Hopefully, in the end, he sees the idea that getting some money in rather than nothing is his best way forward. And we've got to keep the pressure on. That's what we've got to do. The fans push the EFL to keep the pressure on the Secretary of State to get the legislation through as quickly as possible. And just back to Niall, I think Wednesday, we won't forget what you've done as well. Thanks for everything you've done to work through this and to support and to help. For those of us who are looking at this, thanks to the people, the supporters trust. I've got a job. I get paid to do it. I'm there to represent the community. The people in supporters trust are volunteers. They've come to done an absolutely fantastic job to represent fans, and Mark's right. A lot of fans haven't got a clue what's going on. They don't know about all the football league regulations or what's in the government legislation. They just get very frustrated very often. That why isn't the league doing something? And there was some chance to that effect on Sunday. So trying to explain to them that there are people trying to help and work, I think is really important. And there's one or two other credits while the optimism a bit is around. Barry Bannon, I think people were just so supportive of his actions and what he'd done to stay with the club when he could have walked somewhere else and got probably a better deal. Liam Palmer's out there on Sunday, played with the club for over 10 years, committed. At the time when footballers are all seen as mercenaries, there are people like that who stand out as making a contribution to the club, and they are committed to it. So there are good things to come out of this. And hopefully at the end of it, and I'm still optimistic we can get to a good end, those positives are things that we will remember.
Well, that's a good point to draw things to a close. Clive, Mark and Niall, thank you very much indeed for your time. If you've enjoyed it, do please subscribe to the Fair Game podcast. You can find it on all the usual channels. I'm Graham Miller. The producer is Ian Beach. Thank you for listening. And until the next edition of We Love You Football, it's goodbye for now.